Welcome to Pop Culture Warriors, presented by the Post Millennial. I'm your host, Brett Smith. Joining me is my co-host, Lisa Di Pasquale. Our guest today is a good friend and a guy we like to refer to as the godfather of Pop Culture Warriors. Robert Davi is an award-winning actor, screenwriter, director, producer, and singer. He has over 140 film and TV credits and has worked with the likes of Richard Donner, Paul Verhoeven, John McTiernan, and Steven Spielberg. He's also known as one of the best Bond villains of all time, with his portrayal of Ferran Sanchez in the film License to Kill opposite Tim Dalton. Robert, welcome. It's just great to see you again.
It's wonderful to see the both of you, of course, always.
How is sunny Florida?
Beautiful. Florida is wonderful. Why not? Sun-kissed. As long as there's no hurricane coming to us.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to get your take on the Hollywood strike because, so much of the reaction to the strike I see from the public and on social media is this attitude of, oh, who cares what these rich elite Hollywood celebs are on strike about it? It has zero to do with my life and therefore it's not important. And I think people, when thinking about the strike, just think about the effect it's having on the studios, the actors, directors, and mostly the people who make all the big money. But the strike is much more than just that. It's much more than just the very few at the top of the pyramid. And I just wanted to get your take on it, a creative, and explain to have you explain to the audience what the strike is about and why it's important.
Well, first off, the people really that get hurt there's a whole trickle-down economic issue when strikes in Hollywood or in the entertainment industry. And that goes everyone from the post house studios to people that help with sound and editing and transportation and dry cleaning and other services that trickle down and get crippled when the actors and the studios are on strike. So it's not just the actors and actresses and writers and whatnot, but it has a whole other issue. Now, there's different philosophies on why the strike happened. There's deals that are made through the studios with a writer, for instance, that they'll get a contract for 2 or 3 years, and they get paid whether they come up with something or not. And a lot of these are not as let's say, financially viable sometimes as they should be. So part of the studio is wanting to kind of shed that issue and then have to renegotiate contracts per project as opposed to getting a writer or someone for a length of time. Then also with the emerging, and when I had discussions with Jack Valenti, who used to be the president of the motion picture industry years ago, and then also Dan Glickman, who became the head, about the encroaching streaming services that was happening in music. We knew it was happening in the music industry, and that it was just a matter of time before film and TV would be streamed, and that would be another issue. So what you have are the platforms, you have from Amazon to Netflix and the rest of them that are content providers, or let's say content exposers, and they have a solid base of support from monthly subscriptions, which go into the billions. And there is no tracking device for some of these streaming films, so people cannot get residuals. So the residual department of actors is of course, decimated in some way, and for writers and the rest of it, the industry that had a trickle down, you got piece of the action. So that streaming thing is a difficult, again, another difficult economic model that people are trying to figure out. What frustrates me is we knew this was happening 5-10 years ago. Why did they wait till now to have to strike? Why didn't they come up with this or start the board of SAG start this earlier on? And you have a lot of residual aspects that happened with the strike, for instance, or prior to the strike. I've been a vested SAG member for over 45 years. And when I first started as a young performer, I didn't give a crap about what happened when I was a senior, of course. And many of these, actors and actresses today, because forget the top tier, they're another whole ball game. The top tier has another whole ball game. It's the I call it the blue collar worker of SAG, the soldier of cinema, whether it's be an extra or, a character, someone who's not the above the line, for instance. And so what they did was, right before the pandemic, it used to be where our residuals counted for senior performers, and I'm talking about actresses and stuntmen and actors. For senior performers, you were allowed to use your residuals as part of your overall yearly fee to qualify for your insurance. Okay. And they had a certain plan A and a plan B that you were able to then qualify. Well, guess what? Obamacare creeps in and decimates the whole healthcare system. It's a crippling effect on all levels, and people are hurt on all levels. So they took away residuals. And as we know, the Democrat Party is up to SAG, the SAG office all the time. Schiff and Schumer and Pelosi, it's another aspect of their political apparatus, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you never know what deals or side deals or I don't know. I wanted to run for a board member to find out, to get under the hood of all of this stuff, and I didn't campaign hard or anything, but the status quo basically got in again all over, which is okay. They're well-meaning people. I'm not negating anyone, but they're not fighting hard enough. And this idea of residuals, where an actor or actress who's worked their whole career gathering these residuals over the years, and now there's no residuals because of the streaming services, or it's less of a platforming, and the studios are now going into the subscription like Paramount Plus and MGM Plus or whatever, Disney Plus, and they're doing the same kind of thing, being able to circumvent in a certain way, and they're able to syndicate the shows where before you got a piece of the action or a better piece of the action. Now residuals are taxed, and there's pension and health taken out from your residuals. So you're paying into the system. It's not like they don't count, but this gutting of the healthcare for senior performers, to me, is more egregious than what's happening right now. But that's not part of the agreement right now. That's not part of what they're negotiating. That's something else that there's lawsuits against SAG. By Ed Asner was the first one to start that whole thing, to say what's going on there. How could you do that to performers once they were promised this thing? You had that sensitivity or that protection. Now they have various programs that they're working on that are so bureaucratic. It's insane. It's insane. It's absolutely, it's not, you would think with a union, the AFL-CIO, you could call up SAG, who's your union, and they could say, hey guys, especially now because of the strike. So you have a certain amount for senior performer, you have a certain amount of money to make a year to qualify for your plan, for your insurance plan. Now residuals don't count. But because of the strike now, there were 2 films and a TV series that I couldn't do because they weren't able to get waivers.
Right.
They weren't able to get waivers. So that earning potential to get, and many people are in the same issue or even more. So, and that's an unfortunate aspect to it all, and a bit of a hypocritical aspect to it all. And there's not enough attention being paid, especially when you have a guy that's running this Duncan Crabtree, whatever his name is, gets, I think, $800,000, $900,000 a year in a nonprofit, the SAG. How does a guy get $800,000, $900,000 a year working for SAG? And some of the staff, God bless them, get better retirement, 300 so, than SAG members get. They get more retirement than a SAG member can. So that's another very interesting dichotomy. Now, I don't know. I haven't been under the hood, like I say, and this is stuff that you gather from different people. But it's just exactly the paradigm of the Democratic Party gutting out the working men and women of this country. And it continues on through this whole thing. And I don't know what the studios and the negotiating aspects are. Look, everyone's greedy, aren't they? So you can't get a true answer. Or
Yeah, it's like Milton Friedman said, it's always the other guy who's greedy.
who said this?
Milton Friedman to Phil Donahue.
Oh,
He was
wow.
like, when they're talking about greed, and he's like, well, none of us are greedy, right? It's always the other guy who's greedy.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I think there's an overwhelming concern, but not enough, and not people. You see, what you have is a lot of union members that maybe they really are younger or not caring as much as what's going to happen in the next 20 years. It's off in the distance, and I understand that. I would probably feel the same way as I just been starting out and things were different, not realizing, wait a second, guys, what's going to happen? So the idea of a union is to protect that aspect of things for all members. And again, for instance, that earning potential, whereby 4 months so far of not being able to qualify for your insurance because of the strike. So what happens? Are they going to extend that for us? Are they going to extend 4 months or 5 months, whatever it might be, that you can work to get the insurance, because there'll be work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or are you going to be, and they have different nice programs and stuff that you're not going to go without because people have, Medicare. But if you have family members, like a young little baby, like I do, so you're going to pay extra for that kind of a service and thing, which is all part of that. So, look, Ronald Reagan, back in the 40s, and we spoke about this once before, went to Ida Lupino's house in 1946, crashed it, when they were having these AFL-CIO union meetings back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized what was really behind the 8 ball on that. And I'm not saying this is the AFL-CIO today. It's, you need protection. We do need protection. Was a great guy, John Hope Bryant, black man out of Atlanta now. He used to be in Los Angeles. It was Operation Hope. Mm-hmm. And he called it love leadership. That was his idea in terms of capitalism is good, but it has to be based in ethics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's,
absolutely,
we have runaway greed in so many instances. The mosquito guy that comes around here in Florida used to be an individual mom and pop company. Well, they were bought up by the biggest company in Europe, who's bought up all these little places. So now you have no competition. You have, and this is in every part of the industry, in anything, even in entertainment, these conglomerates are controlling the output, the input, it's not as competitive nor as diverse as you would hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I think a lot of people on the right too, they confuse public unions and unions like SAG and those for, other public sector unions and other unions that are more for individual workers. And that's that, negotiating with like taxpayer money, teachers unions and those types of things versus, like you said, unions that really, do protect
based membership based.
There's
Yeah.
like disagreement on how important someone thinks they are.
Yeah. I mean, how, the teachers union, as far as what I'm seeing or hearing about it, it's been the biggest disaster, as you can imagine, because it's another lobbying aspect too. And I remember talking 10 years ago to teachers that were non-union, that were working in the system, and the horrific aspect to what was happening inside that union and where their dues were going to, and only a percentage was going to the what it should go to, and most of it was going to the overhead of fat around the small little filet mignon of workers.
Yeah. Well, another thing that kind of like caught my eye, as a writer about the Hollywood strike is the whole aspect of AI and how that's playing into it. So whether writers are worried about AI taking their jobs, actors, now are having to, have all the dots on them before they, start a role. And I'm particularly curious, it just like came to me, like when, say, someone is canceled for, bad political views, like they want to make a Goonies 2 and they decide they don't like Robert Davi anymore. If you don't own the AI rights or the rights to your face, can they just make it without you?
Well, they'll make something. Yeah. I mean, that's a big danger. The AI is here to stay.
Mhm.
It's not going to go away.
Mhm.
It's going to
Well,
get
I think that,
stronger.
and it spreads, like Brett started off saying, like people think this doesn't apply to them, but I mean, AI is coming after lots of different jobs. I mean, of course, it depends on the human behind it, has to
Look,
prompt it, but there's, these are corporate decisions that are being made that we can do this, without you.
Yeah.
have you tried to call any organization recently?
Well,
You
yeah,
don't
it's
get it. You
because I
don't get a human being till the 18th time.
Yeah.
know, and I'm sure,
After the 600th prompt
well,
that
and they
doesn't
think
work, if
that
I answer your question,
how better, but like I think they're trying to get us to hang up and just say, you know what, forget it.
well, they're doing something. But then you get a human being who's ineffectual and
Mhm.
not trained,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden cannot even answer the question.
Mhm.
So
And they're eventually going to take a lot of the heart out of, like
they've done it already. It's
out
out
of
of
all
it.
this. Yeah.
It's out of it. It's already out of it. I've made, I laugh with my wife in terms of when you're calling a service and trying to get something, and it's press 2 for this and 5 for this and 7 for that, and then the next prompt comes, press 1 or 4 and 3 and 9, and you're doing that, and you do this for about 45 minutes, and then maybe you'll get someone that say, "I'll connect you to the right department," and then you get another prompt.
Mhm.
You don't get a human being.
Yeah.
So and I remember it was nice when you would call up and you'd get physical contact or some kind of emotional contact with a human being.
Something you said about the music industry going to streaming. I think streaming's ruined the music industry, and I think it ruined it for creators. It kind of took the profit motive out of it. Alex Van Halen said that back in the day, in the 70s and the 80s, you used to get $1 an album from a record company, and then that would get divided up amongst the band, however they had their splits. And now it's like you get 50 cents for every 250,000 streams. And it's just it's interesting because Pluto TV right now is showing Raw Deal. Have
What's
it
it
on
called? What station?
your movie Raw Deal is on Pluto TV.
Pluto.
Which is owned by Paramount
That's
and
right.
Viacom, and so it's
Like Tubi. Tubi is owned by another big company.
exactly, and they rotate these films on and off,
That's
and
what I said. That's the new syndication where you don't get a taste.
exactly. So I'm just sitting here. I've watched either parts of Raw Deal or the entire thing over the last 30 days, probably half a dozen times, because when
You
it's
owe Robert a check.
yeah, so because when it's on, I'll just leave it on while I'm working and just have it on in the background, and then once in a while I'll glance over, especially when you're flicking Arnold in the ear in that one scene, which is a great scene. Let's capture the moment. But seriously, I'm just sitting here thinking that, when it was on cable back in the 80s and the 90s, you guys had a mechanism of tracking when it was being watched. And like you said, it's similar to music. There's nobody watching or tracking necessarily, and even what is being tracked just seems like pittance. And a lot of actors and creatives in Hollywood depend on those residual checks to help them bridge the gap from project to project, because a lot of them are all independent contractors, so they work from project to project. There's not a steady stream of income, and the streaming thing, I think, is ruining entertainment. It's ruined music, and I think it's we're watching it ruin movies, and it's kind of like everything becomes a slave to the algorithm. And I don't know if it's because of the tech money that's influencing Hollywood or what, but it's a real shame, because at the end of the day, the creatives are the ones who are going to be hurt, and then they're not going to want to participate in Hollywood. I think a lot of it's going to go to independent films, where you're going to have probably better deals.
Or not, because people need to create, but it'll be a hobby.
Right.
It won't be a career, and it won't be something you can sustain. But
Yeah.
it's something that you'll be working as a waiter or have a side business. And I think a lot of it is side business stuff. Right now people are marketing different products and expanding the whole 9 yards of everything, because it's eventually going to be. And there'll be those at the top tier, of course, that are doing their thing.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but streaming has its. And like I said, I saw that coming and mentioned it to the MPAA years ago. But it just is, it's overwhelming. There's an AI behind all of this, the World Economic Forum and the rest of those guys that I'm sure are just pulling the strings on a lot of different things.
Yeah.
It's too conveniently done. It's too conveniently done and set up.
Well, I think there are powers out there, and even Tim Robbins has talked about this within the frame of the pandemic, which shut down his theater in LA. But he said that there are forces out there that want to kill art. And I believe that. I wholeheartedly believe that, because I think it's through art that you change hearts and minds.
Culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you can shut down the kind of auteur directors that we had when you were coming up, people who really do shape hearts and minds, and as Bob Evans said, feed the soul. If you silence those people, then you just have, kind of this homogenized product.
Well, it's a propaganda machine. It becomes
just
a propaganda machine and not an individual expression.
Exactly.
That moment in Raw Deal, by the way, the director told me, he says, "Hey, on that picture, just you whispered to me, tweak him by the ear as we're taking the picture." That was the director John Irvin's idea, which I loved, because it gave Arnold this uncomfortable moment.
It's really funny.
Which is so funny.
And it looked organic to me. It looked like either somebody made that up on the spot, because Arnold's reaction is kind of like,
he did not know. He did not know.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of people don't know this, but Arnold isn't as tall as most guys his size, and I think you're taller than Arnold.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. You can tell in the film. Yeah. And then the other funny thing is, I noticed, is you're wearing gargoyles. You're wearing gargoyle sunglasses in that movie, which is the same sunglasses that Arnold wore in Terminator, which made them so popular.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice twist.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to kind of like, there's a funny story. I had a purple Jean Paul Gaultier coat that when I first met him, I hadn't known Arnold before Raw Deal. And we met for the first time in Chicago. And I had this Gaultier coat on, and I'm going out to dinner, and he's coming inside with a bunch of guys on the same coat that we had gotten at Maxfield Blue, a place in Los Angeles on Melrose, this trendy clothing place. And "You have the same coat? Yeah. What's going on?" I go, "Yeah." I says, "Yes, but you like it, huh?" He goes, "Yeah, I have to look it." And the guys were laughing. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to wear it in the film." I already told the director, and I was bullshitting at the moment. But I figured, all right, let me just, and the guys right away started saying, "That guy's a good actor. He's got a face on him, Arnold." Blah blah blah. So off screen they were doing this. So now this set us up for a battle.
Yeah. And
there's a funny story that I wore the jacket in the scene, and Arnold goes, "What are you doing?" I says, "I got permission to wear the coat." He goes, "Yeah, but it bothered him." So it becomes a psych out moment.
Yeah.
And the director's over there. He goes, "John," he goes to me. Well, the director goes, "This is your wardrobe here?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, It looks like a sleeping jacket. What are you talking about? This is not a coat here you would wear." He goes, John says, "No, the coat's fine. He could wear it." He goes, "Yeah, but it looks like so obviously the director didn't want to have that shit because Arnold was being. And then he says, "All right, just put the coat over your arm." So I lost that battle. But I said, the director left, and I said to Arnold, I says, "Really? I'm going to go to Dina De Laurentiis, who was the producer. I'm going to tell him what you just did." So I told the AD, I says, "I'm going to go to the bathroom. How long do we have for the next setup?" He goes, "Got 15 minutes. So I left the set just as a joke, went to the bathroom, came back about 11, 12 minutes later, and everybody's behind the camera. The director's there, goes, "Robert!" And the director was upset. Arnold had told him I went to tell Dina De Laurentiis about the coat. And that led us to having a lot of practical jokes on the set, many practical jokes, one of which culminated with Sven Ola Thorsen, who was one of the great guys, Danish strongman and actor, and he was in Gladiator and stuff. And there was a big scene where Arnold has to go in, and he walks through the casino and he walks down, and it's this, and the camera's right here. And big setup with crosses and everything else. And put loads in the cigars. So did the rehearsal a few times, and then finally the cigar with the load on a take, perfect take. And he lights the cigar, inimitable Arnold way. And all of a sudden the cigar lights it and it explodes in his face. And
Holy shit.
so there were so many things, that we had done back and forth, teasing each other.
That's great stuff. No, that's a really underrated 80s action cop genre movie. And I don't know how it performed, but I remember missing that in the theater for some reason. But
it wasn't what they had hoped for.
Yeah,
it was as people, for some reason, things I've done in the past, people look back on and like them better now. It's interesting.
Well, I discovered it on VHS. I think a lot of movies back then had a second life on VHS and home movies, and I think that's something else that's being lost with the streaming is the physical media, and that extra revenue stream that it gives studios, and just abandoning that I think is just, I think it's insane. But what do I know? I'm not running a studio.
Look, they're making good revenue with these streaming services.
Yeah.
When you think about it, what are you paying for a streaming service? $20 a month?
All of these are somewhere average between, I think at this point, between 10 and probably $20. I still think HBO or Max, as they want to call it, I'm going to call it HBO forever, but that's probably the best bang for the buck, I think. And that's at like $14.99.
Right. So you figure how many members, and that's a revenue every month, whether they make anything or not.
Well, and these Tubi and Pluto TV, these are obviously lost leaders. These are people to get people obviously streaming and into it, and then they're like, "Oh, I want more content. I want to access stuff that's not on here." So I'll go
without commercials.
Exactly. And you know what? Honestly,
isn't Netflix? They're saying basically to stay alive, Netflix is. I don't know if it's maybe an empty threat that they're going to have to start adding ads or something.
They've talked about it. Yeah,
it would be an ad model, and then like a top tier that's no ads or something.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll find a way. They know.
Yeah. We've been watching Hell's Kitchen, and we saw that you were on Hell's Kitchen.
Oh, me and the girls, my older girls. Yeah, we did a little. They invited us on there one time.
Now, did you get your meal, or was it one where everyone got thrown out?
No, we ate.
Okay.
We didn't get thrown out.
Sometimes that happens. I mean, you go into that show, especially if you're just a regular diner out there in the dining room, and there's no guarantee that you're going to eat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he might boot everybody out just for not performing well. It happens quite a bit. It's crazy.
Boot who out? The cooks?
All the cooks, yeah, the entire brigade. He'll just throw them all out, or he'll throw them out like one by one. It's hilarious.
He's great. We like watching his shows.
Well, on Pluto, they have an uncensored version. So it's got like the F words and everything.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. I mean, it's the amount of F-bombs that are dropped in that show. It's pretty amazing. Something else I wanted to ask you about. Is it important to separate the art from the artist? I see a lot of people who might disagree with somebody like, say, Robert De Niro on politics, and then vow to never watch another movie of his ever again. And, I was thinking about Paul Verhoeven, who's one of my favorite directors of all time. He's a man you've worked with. He's from Holland, and he's probably a socialist more than likely. I know he has said that he's liberal, and there probably isn't much politically that Paul and I would agree on. But Paul has made, like I said, some of my favorite films of all time, and he is easily one of the very best of the 80s and the 90s. He's made some of the most iconic movies of those decades. And I might not like his politics or how he votes, but I love and adore Paul Verhoeven's art. And why is it important for us as viewers to separate the art from the artist?
Well, because, it's an unfortunate thing. Everyone we have free speech. And if we start blacklisting, and this is what the left was adamant against, but in a different way.
Right.
Back in the 50s, there were people wanting to overthrow America that were accused of it, and most of them were guilty of it. Many of them were guilty. Some were not. But lives were ruined because of the blacklist. And the left in Hollywood, of course, their hair, it's like, have you seen the film? We talked about this. You must see it and talk about it. Mr. Jones, have you seen this?
No.
You have to watch this movie. Ever hear of Walter Duranty?
Of course, yeah.
All right, Walter Duranty was writing for the New York Times, got the Pulitzer Prize because he was in Moscow and he was reporting on Joseph Stalin. You know what Stalin really looked like? Stalin had smallpox. He was a short guy with very bad skin and a withered hand. And he had all his pictures
Retouched.
Doctored, yeah, I knew that.
to make himself look, but that was, and Walter Duranty was praising and ignoring the atrocities that he knew was happening in Russia, Ukraine at the time, and praising Joseph Stalin. New York Times, Pulitzer Prize winner. They were doing it then. The left was doing it then.
Yeah, we just
So
saw
watch
Oppenheimer.
Mr. Jones.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Oppenheimer to me is what they did to Trump. You know what I mean? It shows you the
What we were
behind
saying.
the scenes.
That's what I saw, dude. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I was having the exact same experience right at the end. But I thought there's a lot of conservatives who are saying that that's a pro-communist film, and I keep thinking to myself, no, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I don't think that Chris Nolan went off the deep end like that, and I don't think that James Woods would help produce a film that would be pro-communist.
Well, I think, I don't know what Woods' motivation was, nor do I know Chris's. What I know is what I saw.
Yeah.
And what I responded to emotionally.
Me too.
Now,
yeah.
There can be without a doubt, you have to watch this movie and you have to say, wait a second, this is how our government works when they want to get someone. And this is what they've done to Trump. Yeah. You have to honestly, intellectually say this. And the left will deny it perhaps, and maybe the right won't see it, but I did and you did. So that means where there's smoke, there's fire in some way. If you can see the analogy to what was happening then. I think I also tweeted about it.
Well, the other thing that I saw in there that really keyed me off was that communists and leftists and people who want to subvert the country have been in education and in higher education for a really long time, going all the way back there. And I thought that was I thought that Nolan did that very subtly. And I think he did it right. I don't think that he was saying good or bad. This is the perception of what was going on then. You be the judge. You figure it out.
The intellectual
conclusion.
The intellectual of the day were leftists. And Russia spent more money infiltrating America than anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And communist China is doing the same right now.
Right.
So you have, and all you have to do is go back to even to Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground. From Bill Ayers and Bernadette Dorn, when they were, their whole philosophy, to take a white liberal fighting force, combine them with the Black Liberation Movement, BLM, at that time in the 60s and 70s, to bring down American imperialism, colonialism, and institute world communism. Mm-hmm. That was what they were supposed to do. Now, Bill Ayers, it's no secret, and Bernadette Dorn went into education after they were exposed and never put into jail. Ayers wasn't in jail, but the DA of Gascon of I think of San Francisco, or another guy's name, I forget his name, was raised by Bill Ayers and Bernadette Dorn. He was raised because his parents were put in jail. And so this whole Marxist, we have more Marxists, communists in our government and in our bureaucracy than people will dream of in their philosophy.
Yeah.
They have no idea. When you have a guy like John Brennan voting for the Communist Party, and you have a guy like Robert Kennedy Jr., who I think would make a terrific president, I wish Trump and Kennedy would run together. I think that would unite the nation. I like also Vivek, this guy.
Yeah.
But I think Robert Kennedy Jr., everything he's saying, if you watch what he's saying in terms of exposing there is no more Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, we can't call them Democrats. He's the last remnant of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, you're right.
These are a communist Marxist party. That's what they should be called. They should not be called Democrats any longer. And Joe Biden is their pimp, as Obama is, as Nancy Pelosi is, as Schumer and Schiff and Nadler and the rest of these guys. And there's some on the right that are just as bad. Mm-hmm. And people don't know. They don't get under the hood. So picking up on what you had said, education has been hijacked many, many years, many decades.
Yeah.
Many decades.
Yeah.
They knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To answer your question, what we were originally talking about before we went on the Oppenheimer tangent was separating the art from the artist. And we were talking about Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, and De Niro. Yeah, I say
De
like,
Niro. Yeah, man. Yeah.
look, when De Niro said F Trump at the Tonys,
Right.
I was coming out of a plane. I was on. Luckily, the Virgin Airlines had the TV on. You know, you could watch the TV. So I saw that comment that he made about F Trump at the Tonys Award. So I at the baggage claim, and TMZ is there, and they go, "Hey, what do you think about Mr. De Niro's comment?" I says, "Look, I respect the man. I respect his work greatly." I says, "But it's disgusting what he said." I says, "I didn't like Obama's stuff, but I didn't say, you know." But he has a right to say what he wants to say.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You know, with De Niro, I love De Niro. I could never not watch some of my favorite Robert De Niro movies. And we
He's
watched.
a great actor.
He's a great actor, man, and he's got such presence on screen. And we watched The Irishman, which is, you know, obviously very long. I think it's pretty good pacing. I don't feel that it's a, you know, kind of like Oppenheimer. It had a decent enough pace where you don't feel it's that long. But
well, if it's good performances and a good story, you're okay. You're taking it in.
Cast is so great in that, and I think Al really steals that. For some reason, his Jimmy Hoffa just kind of just sort of steals that movie for me. I just kind of separated. I just think to myself, okay, the guy's a jerk in real life, but that's not going to stop me from enjoying this. And I think that's part of just being an adult, maybe. I don't know.
Well,
no, a lot of people
might start supporting, you know, entertainment, like not just documentaries and, you know, nonfiction books, but we don't have a choice. We want to be entertained and sometimes turn off the political side. Conservatives have mastered the boycott, but not necessarily the boycott. And they don't want to necessarily, like, if you're going to say, you know, you shouldn't watch people that you disagree with, then you got to support financially other entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just to clear it up, I don't think any actor should be, because of his views, should not be watched. I've gotten people that have tweeted or said something, "Hey, I'm not going to watch another," you know, and that's unfortunate, but that's how, you know, an emotional feeling. And, you know, sometimes I'm strong in my criticism of the left because I think there's a corruption there, and on the right, both sides.
Sure.
But
you know what I mean?
It's also talk, because I cannot imagine someone that you would say anything that a true Goonies fan would then never watch the Goonies again.
Goonies never say die.
That's true.
Right.